first and foremost, we're just going to go over the definition of a personal narrative as well as a personal statement. Make sure that we're all working from common language and understanding of what those things mean. Additionally, today you should walk away with an understanding of the purpose behind a personal statement, why you use them, what they're used for, and how they're going to come up in future opportunities for yourself. We'll talk about common mistakes, so things that we see frequently as advisors that show up in personal statements. We're going to dive into the core pieces of a personal statement and really start to talk about what are the building blocks and the foundational pieces. And then we're going to really dive into just one of those core building blocks today, which is about understanding the intentions behind a funding source or an opportunity, and really take some time to actually practice reading through application materials and then applying what we've learned today.
Yes, yes, yes. And round of applause to Hayden, because this PowerPoint or this Canva presentation is so gorgeous and aesthetically better than anything I could have ever made. So what is a personal narrative? I think this question, I feel like I'm answering a lot for folks, which I understand, like how often is somebody telling you to like, tell me your personal narrative, go. But really, to keep it short, it explains how your experiences have informed your skills, your interests, and your future motivations. So a lot of times we hear something like this could be referred to as like an elevator pitch, in a way of just like, quick, like tell me about yourself and how that connects to what you can do, what you want to do, and what you're going to do in the future, right? And really taking time to like familiarize yourself with what your personal narrative is important, because it can always change throughout time. Like your personal narrative is going to develop in the same way that you do. And also it really is applicable to so many documents that you're going to have to write in the future about yourself. So anytime that you have to write about yourself, you have to consider how your personal narrative is going to be a part of that written document. And I find, at least when I'm talking to students, this is the most uncomfortable type of writing that a lot of people do. Like I feel like I talk to a lot of students who would rather write a research paper than have to write about themselves. And I understand, because it takes some time to really feel comfortable developing that narrative and feeling like feels like a natural conversation that you're having. And so, did not like that button.
So what is a personal statement? A personal statement is a written document that details your personal narratives. And oftentimes it's going to be submitted as a part of an application process. So any of you who have had the opportunity to apply for something, which is all of you because you all applied to go to Reed, have written some sort of personal statement in the past. And this really continues to come up as you start to talk about applying to grad school, applying to fellowships, and ultimately also applying to full-time positions. It's looks a little bit different. It's going to be considered a cover letter, and there are some structural differences, but overall the content and intention behind the document is going to be really similar. Like Shania mentioned, oftentimes a personal statement is a really different style of writing than folks are used to in the classroom, and that can be both daunting and a little bit frustrating, because we get used to writing in a certain way and we're trained to write for a certain type of audience with certain type of content, and then you are asked to all of a sudden write about yourself in a very different style with different types of content. And I think that that is just important to recognize that it is different, and just like any other style of writing you're doing, it takes time and practice to really get it right. And so just to make sure that you're giving yourself some grace as you go through this process, that it probably will take a couple tries, and it's sometimes like you're going to want to pull your hair out, and that's okay, and that's normal, even if you're someone who's an exquisite writer, but you will continue to see them throughout your lifetime. So it is an important skill to start to develop.
Yeah. And I would even add to that, I mean, your personal narrative is something that you're going to bring with you in so many other spaces besides writing as well. I mean, when it comes to networking, interviewing, you're still going to want to be able to like have that elevator pitch and be able to interpret, to potential like recruiters or, contacts, like who you are, what you can do, what you can bring to the table, and like what your goals are. And so there is definitely value to like practicing that narrative. I've even had students ask like family members and friends, and getting insight from other people who have like watched you develop, like how your narrative might be presented. And so um, the nice thing about a personal narrative is it can be a collaborative process. And obviously, like CLBR is here to help you, but also like talking with your faculty members, and past supervisors to help them or to help you start to like really cultivate that personal narrative, um, and potentially personal statement is always going to be valuable. Cool. Sorry for that horrible sound. Um, but the purpose of that statement, we've already kind of covered that a little bit, but the purpose of this sort of statement really is to help the reader better understand how you came to be who you are, really. And I think the best way to describe that is by helping them, walk through these points in your life that have been integral and transformative and have led you to who you are and who you see yourself becoming. It's really meant because if we think about these applications, like you're just typing away in your laptop, it can be a very like dehumanizing process, where you don't really get to put yourself, like you don't really get to shine through in some of these applications. And so this personal statement is a moment for the readers to be able to figure out like who you see yourself as a person. And like personal statements can be a little more informal, they can be a little bit more quirky, they can be a little bit more personal and transparent. And so the personal statement really is a point to really humanize your application. And it is very important because to Hayden's point, like this type of writing can feel so awkward, especially if like you're trying to present personal aspects of yourself or be transparent in that way. It can feel hard, and so I think that's the really value to a personal statement is providing like that human touch and letting the reader see you beyond just like an applicant, but also getting to get like that background information and context about how you came to be who you are. Hayden, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, do you want to go to the next slide for me?
Yeah.
Cool. So in addition to what Shania was saying is about the personal statement really adding a personal touch to the application, which I think is, just a really valuable point. Oftentimes when you're using grad school, as an example, you're going to be submitting your transcripts and GRE scores, and those definitely get taken in, obviously are taken into consideration in the admissions process. And a transcript and GRE scores and even your resume are really just sort of facts on a piece of paper. There's not really anything that tells us about you that comes through that. And a personal statement can be at times your only opportunity to infuse a sense of yourself and who you are into the application process. But in addition to that piece, I really think that the personal statement is this convergence of two ideas. And it is about taking your narrative, which we talked about as sort of your beginning, middle, and end, where you've been and where you're going in your own personal, professional, and academic experience and trajectory, and overlapping that with a specific opportunity. And so what we mean by that is thinking about how do I find the similarities between myself and the work that I've completed and what the goal of that opportunity is. So if that's a grad school, really looking at where do my research and academic experiences overlap with the research goals of the institution. For a fellowship, it's, how do my leadership experiences potentially overlap with the leadership goals of this fellowship, right? So we're looking for the spaces where those two things meet. And when we start to talk about some common mistakes that happen, I think that will become even more apparent in terms of finding that overlap and specificity. But that's really, to me, besides that human aspect, is really the kind of key importance of a personal statement. It should show how you, in particular, let me point at you in the screen.
Right.
are really the right fit for this opportunity.
Yeah, agreed. And so really quickly, I think Hayden already hit the nail on the head. Just kidding. There's another slide.
Mhm.
But so the difference between the personal statement and statement of purpose. So your personal statement, to what Hayden mentioned, focuses on your personal narrative and the reasons for applying to this program. So if we just kept it straight to that, it would be a little bit more straightforward. Whereas expanding it to a personal or a statement of purpose is focusing on your academic and career preparedness and research goals. So you often see those as two separate statements. I've also seen them combined, which is really fun. Um, but thinking through what, from my experience, I see people often really struggling with, like, well, research is a part of my personal experience. So where do I fit those examples about my life? Do they go into a personal statement? Do they go into my statement of purpose if, like, I am very passionate about research? Um, and like those are things that you really do have to like kind of figure out. And of course we're here to help, but like figuring out like really what is the prompt exactly asking you. Because I think oftentimes we lose sight of like the prompt's questions that they're seeking to gain from you. But then also thinking through how you can shine light on your interests in different ways. Like I think there's ways to talk about your personal interests in research and separating that from your professional intentions in research, right? Um, but these are very much two distinct statements that sometimes it gets challenging to figure out what parts of your life you need to put into each. Hayden, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh, I would just say when you are in situations where you are given the opportunity to submit both a personal statement and a statement of purpose, um, you want to do the best you can to use your word count wisely, right? So you've gone potentially from having 1,000 words in a personal statement, and then also another 1,000 words for a statement of purpose. You don't want to spend 1,500 of those words writing about the same things, right? And so really looking at them, and this goes for whenever you're looking at an entire application, that each piece of the application really introduces something new about you and something that is a standalone, but also that it should be complemented by your other documents. I think that's another thing that I see a lot when we're looking at the sort of comparing the personal statement to the statement of purpose, that then they can become very similar documents. And while that doesn't necessarily mean that you've done it wrong, you haven't necessarily capitalized on the amount of space that you've been given to speak to both yourself, in terms of your personal narrative, as well as your academic preparedness, research goals, and things of that nature. So I think that's just a really important piece to keep in mind as you're going through and developing both of those documents.
Yeah. And I think a great thing too, and I'm just going to keep talking about it. I mean, like, we're here for you to, like, if you're struggling to think of like what more to include, I think students often run into that where they're like, I feel like I've said all that I need to say. And now I feel like because I don't have enough to say, I might be repeating myself in that other statement. And like, that's where we come in. We're happy to help, like, think of like more ways to present your information and to add context in different ways and to shine light on different areas of yourself. But again, like I mentioned earlier, it's also valuable to get feedback from faculty, supervisors, our PCAs, shout out, to help you to kind of start figuring out like how can you really make the best of that word count. Okay, so very quickly, common mistakes. I'm going to ask if you feel welcome to. Oh, sorry. If you feel welcome to, go ahead and post in the chat from your own experience, like, what are some common mistakes that you may have had experience with when it comes to uh, like your own experience writing personal statements? Or like things that you've really questioned, like, is this the right thing to be talking about? Um, or potentially any feedback you have ever received from somebody about like what could have been better about a personal statement of yours? Um, or any questions you might have so far in the presentation. feel like I try to fit everything about myself into one statement. Yes. Yeah. I think that's the hardest part about it too, is like you can have so many interests and so many things about you that make you amazing. And it's like, which things do I need to like choose to cut and keep? And I think sometimes I find myself switching between like the term personal narrative and themes. Because I think your personal narrative can be a pretty broad thing. Whereas the themes should be a little bit more narrow. And so I'm trying to think of a good example of that, but like that, your personal narrative has, for example, for me, like I'm a first generation woman of color and always like really had trouble during my undergrad finding access to resources in higher education. That has led me to being very skilled now at navigating those spaces because I had to learn to do it myself, which led to me wanting to be in higher ed. And like that would be like my personal narrative. But then the themes are I'm passionate about helping students of color. I'm passionate about career advising. I'm passionate about connecting students to resources. And so those themes are like more specific. And I think when you're trying to fit everything on a document, it may be because you're trying to incorporate all the themes about yourself instead of trying to be narrowed to one or two really
Mhm.
consistent themes.
Yeah, we got a couple other ones that popped in. Ooh, and another one. Yay! So disclosing too much personal information, oversharing, that's a really common one. And we're going to dive a little bit more into that. Over formality. So being either too formal, but also leaning too far in the other direction and ultimately becoming too informal.
Yes.
Uh, the last one, like not even knowing where to start. Um, that's real. I feel that like
Yes.
on a real level.
And like perfectly enough, all of these that you've listed here, we are about to cover for you. So thank you for posting comments. So yeah, like what we just talked about, too broad. Your narrative is too like your narrative should be focused and specific. But when you feel like there's so much about yourself you want to include in like a 500 or a 500 word statement, um, that can be challenging because then you start to wonder what is relevant, that the audience actually wants to hear from me. Um, and so it goes back to, I would say, considering what the purpose of the fund is. Like Hayden mentioned earlier, like if the fellowship or the program you're looking at, its focus is on leadership, and you want to bring up like all these experiences you've had on campus, that demonstrate that, starting to think through like one or two examples that really get at their description of leadership, how they define leadership, and what are the best examples that fit that. How can you make a connection between your personal narrative and their definition? Oh, sorry, we got to admit somebody really quick. Their definition of leadership. Hayden.
Yeah. I think in addition to those things, oftentimes something that I see is that folks will give sort of, oh my God, I'm going to use the word in the definition, which is not always helpful, but we'll give really broad strokes. So we're looking at the really high level things. And I think one of the best ways, that this is something that you learn is when you're first learning writing essays and structuring and storytelling is we want you to show versus tell. Telling the audience that I really enjoy helping people is not nearly as strong as giving a specific example of helping someone. And oftentimes, when you give specific examples, it takes up more space. And I think that on a first draft, what we try to do is just get down as much information as possible. And then going back in and, like Shania said, picking up on those themes. What are the pieces that I'm really trying to get across? And can I give an example of that?
Mhm.
Can I show the reader that I am invested in those things? And can I show them how I've actually had that play out in my experiences, which is a much stronger thing to read than just being told, like, I really like chocolate. No, I want you to show me how much you like chocolate. That was a terrible example, and I
I
don't know why.
really want to see that, but
Don't talk.
Um, but that's a good point. I think this also comes back. Oftentimes I see this really with cover letters, and I'm sure Hayden has too, where um, your cover letter is so broad that it basically just becomes like a narrative version of your resume because you want to basically include everything in that cover letter. And so, to Hayden's point, it's too high level. You're not actually, you don't give yourself the space to really dig deep into providing context on like one or two examples. You have like 10 examples and they're all one sentence each, um, which is basically your resume, very surface level information, but now it's in a paragraph format. Um, and so that's a time in which I think, to Hayden's point, like the best thing you can do is give yourself one or two themes that you're going to stick to, one or two examples that you're really going to drill down into, that you can provide even more context to what may already be on your resume. Um, and it's in line with the theme of the thing you're applying to, it's in line with your narrative. But it really gives them that idea of like your commitment to whatever it is. And it gives them more insight than your resume could. I hate that sound. There we go. It's too academic. Um, Please remember this is not a research paper. um, so this I think is something that I've ran into quite a bit of just like students, you're starting to flex this new muscle, right? Like you're starting to build this new skill. So you're taking your experience in writing and really starting to like transition into this level of personal persuasive writing. And so what we oftentimes see is students who, to someone's point earlier, are talking almost like too formally at that point. Um, to that you start to lose sight of like we start to like it becomes less human, like we were talking about earlier. Unless that's just exactly how you talk, then be you. But or potentially people have I've seen a lot of citations in personal statements before, and we really want to be cognizant of like personal statements generally don't necessarily need citations. I would say maybe like one, max two is probably fine. But this paper should be about you, right? So you don't want to get too in depth about somebody else's work or somebody else's research. Um, Hayden,
No, I think that covers it.
cool.
Cool. For this next one, so there's not enough about you. I think that this is a really good piggyback on the it's too academic. So one of the things that can happen when writing the personal statement is to accidentally veer away from the personal piece. And like Shania had mentioned, like a research paper, oftentimes you're citing other people, you're talking about other people's ideas. And really your personal statement should be a reflection of your own experiences and your own thinking. And a good rule to follow, and this is, I shouldn't say rule, a good like general guideline. You can break this rule. Please do not like go through your word count and make sure that you've hit an 80-20 mark. Is 80% about you and then 20% about the program or fellowship that you're applying to. And really what that, and another way to think about that is just to balance. An easy way to do that is to look at your essay, say it's 2 pages and you're realizing it's 2 pages, 6 paragraphs, 4 paragraphs are about other people's academic interests and the program, and only 2 paragraphs are about you. At that point, it's no longer a personal statement. So that's just something to take into consideration. How much have they really been able to learn about me by reading this personal statement? If you don't feel like it's a lot, then it's time to go back and reframe and look at rebalancing the essay.
Yeah. Agreed. Someone else's point, in disclosing too much information, how do we know when? But yeah, things can sometimes be too personal. If you would not feel comfortable interviewing and discussing this story with an admissions officer, it should not be in your essay. If it's something that's going to make you potentially like upset if you were having to like talk about this out loud, then it shouldn't be in your essay, not because it's not valid, but because you could potentially get interviewed and have to talk about this out loud. And so that's where I think we do want to be cognizant of like how much is too much. And another way to think about it too is like if you're sharing information that's personal, but it doesn't actually add to um, the purpose of the fund, or not the purpose of the fund, but like it's not additive to you trying to demonstrate who you are as a person. It doesn't like really help us see how you got to be where you are. Um, I'm trying to think of a good example of that potentially, but I think if you feel as though you're starting to overshare, then that might be your personal flag. That it might help to have like another set of eyes see if it's oversharing or not.
Mhm. I think a good example or a question that I get fairly regularly is whether or not um, to disclose a disability or particularly a mental health disorder.
Mhm.
Uh, and I would never ever want to make someone feel like disclosing their mental health disorder is not okay. But I think to Shania's point, it's thinking about like what, how does that support the overall argument that you're trying to make in your personal statement? I think it can be a really, really valuable thing. If you are talking about your ability to overcome adversity and saying, you know, I was diagnosed with a learning disability my freshman year of college, that's reflected in my grades. And these are the things that I've done to be able to manage and navigate that. And you can see in my junior and senior year grades that I've had a huge improvement.
Mhm.
Uh, and what that shows me is that you were able to, you know, advocate to a point where you were able to see someone to get a diagnosis and then to navigate through that.
Mhm.
Uh, if you were just to say, I have a learning disability and move forward from that, then there, to me, in terms of the context of the personal statement, there's not necessarily a value add. I think that there's also can be sort of a general misconception of there's a value. I mean, I hate to use this phrase, but there's like this thing about trauma porn and sort of the sort of feeling that you are supposed to like show your like rip yourself bare or whatever the term may be,
Yeah.
and really all out on the table. And I think that that is absolutely not necessary to write an effective personal statement.
Mhm.
And some people are able to do it and do it really, really well. And they feel like that is something that is a defining piece of themselves and is defining in the work that they do. And other people don't. And so I think that it's totally up to your discretion whether or not something is going to be disclosed, how many details you share about something. You can always um, allude to something without feeling the need to really dive into the nitty gritty of it. And so I think that that's something that is really worthwhile to sit down and discuss with an advisor to the point that you're comfortable discussing whether or not that is going to be appropriate for your materials.
Yeah. And I would add even to that point of like we've had students, I've had students I've worked with who felt it integral that they communicate something that really truly is upsetting for them in a personal statement. And that was something they wanted to do knowing that it's upsetting. And what we did was we went ahead and planned ahead. We practiced mock interviewing, and like worked together so that student could develop a level of comfort talking about something that she knew was uncomfortable but was potentially going to have to interview on. And so it is, to Hayden's point, totally up to your discretion. And if you need that sort of support of like, I'm going to put this in here, I'm not excited to have to talk about it, like we're here to help. It's too informal. Will the reader be able to take you seriously? Remembering that this is also an opportunity for you to demonstrate your writing skills. Um, And so I think this kind of does go in line with like oversharing potentially, and something being informal. Like, is it distracting from you trying to persuade somebody to give you money or give you a job or get you into grad school, right? And so if something is too informal, it can generally look like you're using like colloquialisms or there's like really informal phrases that potentially that reader isn't going to find impressive. Um, I sometimes see a good example is I see people using the word lots instead of like a lot or many. I get lots. And those are just like little things that you would think aren't a huge deal, but once somebody starts to see the pattern of that, they like can't unsee it. And so you do want to be cognizant that like you still are writing, you still want to be writing at your academic level and competencies that I know you all have, right? And so it's not so much that you're like writing less academically, like writing at like a lower level, but that you're just writing to persuade a different audience, right? Um, and so you still want to demonstrate your capacity and your competency to be given this opportunity. Um, Aiden, and go.
No, completely. I will say, like, I'm someone who, this is something for me personally that I struggle with. And I would just say that in terms of striking a tone, it also is important in knowing sort of what you are applying to. The recommendation that I would give someone who's applying for potentially a theater program or a master's in social work is going to be different than someone who's applying to law school in terms of formality and expectations in terms of writing skills.
Yeah.
If you are applying to a program where it is going to be writing intensive and persuasive writing is going to be a large part of the work that you will be doing, it is exceptionally important to take into consideration how they will be viewing the writing of your personal statement or any other written documents you submit. And it really does become a part of your portfolio. And I think that that is something to be considerate of as you are going through this process.
Yeah. And I think if you're not sure about that at all, most fellowship websites offer a page on like advice for the applicant. So there generally is almost somewhere on the website. If you can't find it, let me know. I'll find it for you. But there's always a page on the website that gives you some clarity on like how we're hoping you write your essays. Like what's the tone that we're expecting. When it comes to cover letters and jobs, you want to be like, I always say, like, snoop around on their website, be really cognizant of how they see themselves. Like, if they're fun loving Google campus, like, then you want to be aware of like who your potential reader is and the type of like company culture that they're looking for in applicants. And do you match that? Do you match their style? And so there's plenty of ways to kind of do that research informally to figure out like how formal versus informal do I need to be? Who's the reader? Who's the audience here? And we're happy to help do that research with you. Cool. The building blocks. Can you talk through this?
Yeah. Before we move forward, I dropped a note in the chat too, but please feel free to ask any questions you have in the chat and we'll make sure to do our best to get those answered. But I do want to take a second before we sort of switch gears into talking about the building blocks and getting into some hands-on work to see if there are any questions before we move forward. We'll also have time at the end for questions. So if you don't have questions now, that's totally okay.
Should I turn like some music on, some like Jeopardy music?
Yeah, turn on. No, that's okay. Should I? I can get started talking.
Okay, I'll keep an eye on the chat.
Thanks. So in moving away a little bit from common mistakes, we started to talk about, and potentially you're noticing some themes of what we're coming back to in terms of actually putting together and designing your personal statement. We feel that there are really three main building blocks that that are combined to create a successful personal statement. The first one, which we've talked about a couple times, is intentions of the program. And so first and foremost, you need to know, like, why are they supplying this funding? What is this graduate program for? What are they looking for? What are they hoping for? And what does success look like for them in terms of their applicants and then after they complete the program? I think that this is one of the things that folks forget about most often when they're writing personal statements. Um, and it also ties into, I get the question a lot, like, can I write one personal statement that I use for everything? The answer is no, you can't, because this is going to change depending on the program or opportunity that you're applying for. And so you need to take that into consideration as you're writing personal statements. The second thing is going to be your catalyst. And oftentimes this shows up as a hook or the beginning of your personal statement that really sucks the reader in, makes them excited to continue to read what you've submitted. And your catalyst is really that moment in time that set you on this trajectory. What is the thing that really, that class you took in high school that really changed the way you view the world? Opportunity you had volunteering, the conversation you had with your mom, whatever it may be. It can be large or small, that really sort of set you on this pathway to actually get to the point where you're applying for this opportunity. And then lastly, from the catalyst, you're going to think about stepping stones. So a personal statement really is, it is a narrative, it's a story, it should have a beginning, middle, and end. And that's really where these stepping stones start to come together. So we're thinking about, where have you been? What are you doing right now? And what do you hope to do in the future? And how are all of those things connected both to your catalyst and then ultimately to the opportunity itself that you're applying to?
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, I think that's where, to Hayden's point, somebody asked earlier, like, where do I even start? Start at your catalyst. Because that's, I think, sometimes also when I ask students what that is, that's the first time that someone has actually like explicitly thought about, like, when did I become interested in this? Because no one's really ever asking you when you became interested in like environmental science, or when you became interested in like, I don't know, the thing you're interested in. But like your catalyst is a moment for you to also set the stage on like what your personal narrative is, or like when it at least became like your realization, like you're really starting to, it's almost like your thesis, like your thesis statement, your catalyst statement is like, this is the theme of this essay or this essay. And everything I talk about is going to stem from this thing. And then the stepping stones, really, I think students do a great job of being chronological, but then they don't tell me how those two things connect. So you're like, summer of 18, I interned here, and then summer of 2020, I interned here. And they're two separate events. But I want to know, what did you do in summer of 19? Why was it meaningful? What did you learn? And how did you take that learning and decide to do what you decided to do in 2020? It's like, you need to help walk me through what you got from that like led you to this next thing with purpose. Because otherwise, a lot of times I read it and it sounds like, boop, I was interning here and then I went to sleep for a whole year and woke up and now I'm here. And I don't know what happened in the middle. And so again, like, those are things, a writing skill that we're happy to help like you work through. But the reader needs to be like, you need to hold the reader's hand in walking them through what it was, why you did it, what you learned, and how it informed whatever you went on to do next. Understanding the intentions of the program. So Hayden mentioned this is something that I think we see people losing sight of, or maybe not including as much in their personal statement as we would like to see. But the intentions of the program are pretty readily found on the website. And sometimes it takes a little bit of digging, but I think there's many ways that you can get an idea of like what the goals of a program are. Generally, the website will have an explicit page on like the mission or the history or like the About Us page. But you need to review the application process, eligibility guidelines, to figure out like who is the type of person that is eligible for this type of award. So you can start to narrow down, like, do you fit the intentions of the program? And then identifying the goals for the fund, which can again be found on the About Us page or their mission statement. Why did this money or this program come to exist? and what are their goals for those that go through the program. And then looking through the selection criteria. I think this is something that's very much overlooked. I think your faculty are considering the selection criteria when they're writing your recommendations, but selection criteria is giving you that rubric of like, am I hitting all of these bullet points for like what they're looking for when they review my application? And so these are ways for you to make sure that you are checking off all those bullet points and that your application is in line with what they're looking for. And sometimes this really does take a little bit of extra research on your end, but it is something that also will make you a more informed applicant when you're writing your personal statement or when you potentially have to interview with them. All right.
Cool. Now we are going to go ahead and then dive into a quick activity. We're going to take about 8 minutes in breakout groups. So what we're going to ask each of you to do, we're going to share the link for the Fulbright Germany ETA, which is the English Teaching Assistantship. And what we'd like for you to do in your groups is identify the goals for the program, identify the selection criteria, and then we'll ask for each group to identify one group member to share back 1 to 2 things from each category. And then we're going to take some time at the end of that to share back with the larger group. And so Shania, if you can break them out into breakout groups, that would be awesome.
Yeah, hold on. I'm clicking the button. I'm clicking the button. Hold on, I may have to pop out of the. Hold on, I'm gonna stop sharing for a second, okay?
Okay.
I don't think maybe that's what it is. Yep, that's what it is. Okay, so 17 people, maybe 5. How
Yeah,
many?
that's
Cool.
5 per.
There we go. Great. And then very quickly, I will, oh my gosh, get me out of Canva. I'm gonna copy and paste the directions into the chat really quick, Hayden.
Yeah, I can drop the link in there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I embedded the link onto the ETA link.
Yeah, but if the Zoom's not open, they can't, or if the thing isn't open, they can't see it.
Good job, team.
Boop, boop.
I'm taking lots of notes. I'm just gonna go do some other work for a little bit.
I can
Oh, no worries.
broadcast to them, right?
Yeah, will you broadcast the link? Sorry, I know it's a pain that I'm not in the actual Zoom.
Yeah. Oh my God. I really don't enjoy the fact that breakout rooms, like you lose all communication with them as like the host. Like, does not make this easy.
You can go in if you wanted to, Shania. You can pop.
Yeah, I might do that. I'm the one recording though. So will it just like stay, will it record like them if I go in there?
I don't know.
If it does, I can edit it out, Shania. It's not a problem.
Okay, I'm gonna go in.
Bye.
Can I go in as the host? Oh, I can. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking for a
I literally like looked at it and was like, yeah, great, let's do that. And then
So I wanted to check really quickly. Does everyone understand the directions?
I know you sent them to us and I saw them and I was like, cool, those are the instructions. And then I didn't read them.
Okay, I just want to check if you, I'm going to pop into all the groups really quick. But yeah, so I sent the link to the Fulbright website. I can send that again though in this.
Oh yeah, I would appreciate that.
Would that be helpful? Okay. So I don't know if I'm inside of your chat, if it will
It should,
get that.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So this is one of the ETA descriptions for a Fulbright in Germany. And so just looking through this one page's description of the English teaching assistantship to
Mhm.
identify the goals of this one program and the criteria they're looking for in selecting applicants.
Okay.
Cool. Okay. I'm going to pop into the next one if that's all right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Starters and have the capacity to negotiate cultural differences and respond to challenges that arise on a day-to-day basis.
Hi.
Hey,
Sorry, I just wanted to pop in to make sure you received the directions and like what your assignment makes sense. Like you know what to do. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Bye. Hey, I'm just checking in really quick to make sure you receive the directions, you know what to do. If you don't, I can also provide clarity.
I mean, I think we've got the directions and we are currently digging through the website.
Perfect. Cool. All right. I'm gonna head out.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Like being a good ambassador almost.
Hey all, I just want to interrupt really quickly to make sure you receive the directions and you understand what the task is. If there's anything I can clarify, I'm happy to.
Yeah, we were looking at like eligibility requirements and goals of the program. Yeah.
Yep, yeah, using the link sent for the Fulbright German ETA program. Yeah, just looking through that description to figure out what the goal of that specific program is and the criteria they're looking for. Did you receive the link? I can send that.
We couldn't get to the link, but we just looked it up on Google and I think we have the right page.
Perfect.
But a link would be good anyway.
Yeah, I'll send it just in case. Did you receive that?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Sounds like you got it. I'm gonna hop out.
Thank you.
Yep.
I feel like we don't have the right link. Hello.
I can send you the link. That's why I'm here.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so using this link for the Fulbright German ETA program, looking through just this one page of the description to see what are the goals for their program and what is the criteria they're looking for and who they're looking to select.
I think we found a similar page, just not the exact same.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, that's why I started popping through just to make sure. Great. Okay, I'm going to leave this room. Bye. Oh, I'm on mute. Everyone's on track. Some of them saw that link and some of them didn't, but they're all
Okay.
happened.
We should probably call them back in like a minute or two. We really took.
Yeah, we should have done an hour and a half. It's okay though. We knew we were gonna have to have part 2, so.
Yeah, I'm glad we decided to do that. There's no way we could get through all of that content in an hour.
I'm too talkative. Okay. I'm gonna give them. I hate the breakout rooms so much.
If you, Shania, if you end the breakout room, it gives them 1 minute, like a 60-second countdown.
Okay, I did it.
My mom is texting me from the skate park with Andre, and she just texted me, there's a bunch of badass teenagers here. And I could just imagine her like,
Scowl.
welcome back.
Hello. Did they close? Is it still counting down?
It's probably still counting down. I don't know.
Yeah, 10 seconds. Cool. And we're just gonna power through this last 3 minutes.
Yeah, I've got time after this too, so I can hang out and help answer questions if there's folks who have individual questions.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Hello. Seems as though I am responsible for sharing my screen, aren't I? I'm gonna do that now.
Yeah. While Shania does that, I just want to say that we know that we're running a little bit behind in our presentation. We've just got like 1 or 2 more slides to review and then have some time for questions. You're more than welcome to hang out past 4 o'clock and ask any individual questions you might have. But if you need to log off at 4, that is totally okay. Feel free to exit as needed.
Cool. Ooh. Okay, so in the activity, we asked you to review the Fulbright German ETA, review their goals and selection criteria, and then come back prepared to share like 1 or 2 things from each category to the larger group. So hopefully someone was taking notes. But if you could all just like decide who wants to share, or you can post to the chat, whatever works. And just give us 1 or 2 things you noticed on the goals of the program first. We'll start there. Yes, strengthen cultural relationships between the US and Germany. That's like the biggest goal of the entire award. And you can also feel welcome to like unmute if you want to like speak it out, whatever works best. Then also, we'll go ahead and move on. Yeah, help improve teaching English and American Studies in Germany, absolutely. And you're all, I'm sure, just going to say the same things I have written on this slide. So let's just cut to the chase. Yeah, Hayden. And then I have to pop off in about a minute, Hayden. But I'm going to make you the host real quick. Okay. If you want to go forward, I'm going to do that.
Yeah. So in just thinking about this, so again, as many of you probably noticed, goals for the fund: strengthen education, improve the teaching and English language of American studies at all types of German schools, and offer a unique opportunity for ETAs to advance their teaching skills and immerse themselves in education and cultural environments in Germany. So one of the biggest things, the Fulbright is a great example of this, where folks think, oh, well, I'm going to go teach English abroad. And so it's a teaching assistantship. I'm meant to become a teacher when I leave that. And that's actually not the overall intention of the Fulbright. Same thing if you're applying for a research award. At the end of the day, it's an ambassadorship program. They're looking for folks to go over and be representatives of the US to their host country, immerse themselves in the culture, and then bring that back to the States and really create an ambassadorship between the 2 countries. Fulbright is also a really great example of it's this huge overarching fellowship that has lots of different intricacies depending on this countries that you're applying to. And so for this particular one, it's they want you to have at least 2 years of college level study of German. Grant is especially suited for students of German studies, literature, or history. And this is really an important piece. And this is where you would start to think about crafting some themes and specific examples for your personal statement. They're looking for resilient self-starters, capacity to negotiate cultures, different cultures, I'm going to assume that says, well-rounded, adaptable, and communicative, skills and motivation needed to assist in teaching teaching English, and then also curriculum design and teaching.
Yeah. Sorry, this is cut from their website, so
it's okay.
My bad.
But thinking about those, particularly those personal attributes that they're presenting, thinking about what are personal experiences that you've had that you can build into your narrative that would exemplify those attributes in yourself. If you were just writing a personal statement, and not, potentially a statement of grant purpose, this would also be a space that you would talk about any curriculum design you had, experiences you have teaching, your interest or engagement in German history and culture, experiences with that. And so again, this is the starting point and starting to think of what am I going to incorporate into my personal statement? How can I show that I meet the criteria and I am what they are looking for in terms of this fund?
Yeah. And I'd also add, so like this German ETA program is obviously, as you can see, very specific to students who have some sort of trajectory in like future German studies, lit language teaching. So if you maybe don't fit this exact model that they have here, like finding ways to demonstrate other ways that you connect to German culture, whether it's through your family or like other ways that you've found to connect to the culture that maybe aren't listed as like German studies, lit history, but like ways in which maybe you have like some sort of affinity to Germany. And if you haven't, if you don't have experience with like curriculum design, like how have you in other ways taught people, maybe through tutoring or mentoring? So really trying to kind of read between the lines here of like, how can I connect my experience if it maybe isn't like verbatim what they have listed?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I have to hop off, y'all. Thank you for joining. Hayden's gonna answer your questions.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Oh, you're on your phone.
That's fine.
Is it cool? Okay. Stop sharing. And wonderful.